Welcome to Staffworks Explained. If you are here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel. In this video, we'll be talking about the Bishoftu International Airport in Ethiopia and why Ethiopia Airlines has pushed the contractor decision to 2027 and why the East-West contest matters. Ethiopia Airlines is approaching one of the most consequential decisions in the history of its expansion. Who will build the main works of the proposed Bishoftu International Airport, a project estimated at about 12.5 billion US dollars and intended to ultimately handle as many as 110 million passengers per year. But the decision is taking longer than originally planned. The airline had expected to move from pre-qualification and competitive bidding toward contractor selection in August 2026. That timetable has now been pushed to January 2027 after prospective contractors asked for additional time to develop their technical proposals, work through financing arrangements, and also engage subcontractors. On the surface, this looks like an ordinary procurement adjustment. For a project of this size, however, a 5-month extension is worth examining closely. Bishoftu is not simply another airport construction contract. It sits at the intersection of Ethiopian Airlines' long-term commercial strategy, Ethiopian infrastructure ambitions, as well as international project financing, and a much wider contest over economic influence in Africa. The shortlist itself makes the contest difficult to ignore. Chinese construction companies, as well as Chinese-led joint ventures, occupy a substantial share of the available positions, while European, Turkish, Middle Eastern, South Korean, Indian, and Russian companies are also competing. At the same time, Washington has openly sought a role for America's company in the project. The central question, therefore, is not simply why the award has just been moved from August to January 2027. It is whether Ethiopian Airlines is using the additional time to improve the commercial and the technical qualities of the bid, or whether the complexity of financing, consortium formation, as well as geopolitical competition is making the final decision more difficult than originally anticipated. Let's start by looking from Bole International Airport to Bishoftu International Airport. That background is important. Ethiopian Airlines has built its international network around Addis Ababa Bole International Airport. That strategy has worked remarkably well. The carrier had developed Addis Ababa into one of the Africa's most important connecting hubs, linking cities across Africa with Europe and Middle East, as well as Asia and North America. But the same success creates a capacity problem. Bishoftu International Airport is intended to provide the physical infrastructure for the next stage of Ethiopian Airlines growth. The planned airport, approximately 45 kilometers southeast of Addis Ababa, is designed around 4 runways and an eventual capacity of up to 110 million passengers annually. For comparison, Ethiopia Airlines says the planned capacity would be roughly 4 times that of existing Bole International. The scale is therefore not incremental. It represents a deliberate attempt to create an entirely new aviation hub capable of supporting Ethiopian Airlines for decades. The project formally entered construction in January 2026 when Ethiopian Airlines held the groundbreaking ceremony. That distinction matters. The January 2027 contractor decision does not mean the airport project itself has been suspended. Initial works are already underway. The African Development Bank is involved in financing structure and has committed 500 million US dollars while also helping mobilize a much larger finance package. Ethiopian Airlines has previously indicated that the project will rely substantially on external financing rather than being funded entirely from the airline's own resources. That financing structure helps explain why contractor selection is more complicated than choosing the company offering the lowest construction price. So what exactly has been delayed? There's an important technical point here. The project is being procured through an EPCF structure. EPC means engineering, procurement, and construction. Broadly, the contractor is responsible for engineering the works, procuring the required equipment and materials, and constructing the facility. The additional F refers to financing. In practical terms, this means the contractor is not being considered simply as a company that will arrive with excavators and build a terminal. Financing arrangements are part of that commercial equation. Ethiopia Airlines has divided the main works into 4 packages. There is main facilities, support facilities, airfield and infrastructure, as well as offsite links. The airline completed the pre-qualification process and published a shortlist in April 2026. Its own procurement announcement shows just how international the competition has become. From the main facilities package, the shortlisted bidders include a consortium involving China Communication Construction Company, China Construction 8th Engineering Division, and China Road and Bridge Corporation. Is We Build, IC, ICTAS joint venture. There is a China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation and Beijing Construction Engineering Group joint venture. There is Samsung CNT. There is Vinci. There is a UCC Kaleon Consortium and by Beijing Urban Construction Group. Across the 4 packages, Chinese companies or Chinese-led ventures account for 15 of 33 shortlisted positions, according to reporting based on the Ethiopian Airlines shortlist. That is significant presence, but it is important not to overstate what the numbers mean. A shortlisted position is not a contract. A company appearing in several packages is not necessarily going to win several packages, and joint ventures mean that nationality cannot always be reduced to a simple Chinese versus Western count. The competition includes major European contractors such as Vinci, We Build, Turkish companies including IC ICTAS and Kaleon, South Koreans Samsung NCT, Qatar UCC, India Afcons, as well as other commercial firms of international repute. Then, why move the decision from August to January? The most immediate explanation comes from bidders themselves. Ethiopian Airlines Chief Executive Officer said prospective contractors requested additional time to finalize their bids, negotiate with lenders, and engage subcontractors. Reporting on the decision indicates that the revised timetable is not expected, according to Ethiopian Airlines, to change the project's overall implementation schedule. That explanation is credible. A project with a price tag of $12.5 billion is too large for a contractor to price like an ordinary project or building project. A serious bid requires detailed engineering assumptions, construction sequencing, procurement plans, risk allocation, subcontractor commitments, and a financing strategy. The financing element is particularly important. If a contractor is expected to bring or arrange financing, it cannot simply submit a technical price and wait for the client to approve it. Banks, export credit agencies, and other lenders need to examine the project risks. They will want to understand the proposed contractor, the government obligations, revenue assumptions, currency exposure, repayment structure, construction risk, as well as the contractual protections available to lenders. This is where the 5-month extension can make sense from a project management perspective. A rushed bid can produce a superficially attractive price while leaving major assumptions unresolved. Those assumptions eventually return as claims, variations, financing gaps, or schedule disputes. For Ethiopian Airlines, the more important objective is therefore not to award the contract as quickly as possible. It is to award them on terms that can survive financial close and construction. There is another reason. The shortlisted groups are likely negotiating with different banks, export credit institutions, equipment suppliers, and subcontractors. Those relationships can take time to assemble. A consortium may have the construction capability but still need to demonstrate that its financing package is credible. Another bidder may have a strong financing but need additional technical partners. The postponement may therefore be less a sign of weakness than recognition of project's complexity. But it also tells us something else. The procurement is not yet commercially mature enough for Ethiopian Airlines to be comfortable making the final commitment. Let's look at the Chinese advantage. This is where the story becomes more interesting. Chinese companies have a long record of delivering large transport and infrastructure projects across Africa. They also operate within a financing ecosystem that can combine contractors, equipment suppliers, state-linked financial institutions, and export credit mechanism. That can be a major competitive advantage on an EPCF project. A contractor that can offer both construction capacity and credible financing pathway is potentially more attractive than a contractor that can provide only the construction component. Chinese presence in Bishoftu shortlist reflects that wider capability. Companies such as CCCC, CRBC, CCECC, Beijing Construction Engineering Group, and Beijing Urban Construction Group are not newcomers to major infrastructure work in developing markets. Ethiopian Airlines shortlist confirms that Chinese companies are represented across the airport's major packages, rather than being confined in one specialist area. But it would be simplistic to conclude that Chinese companies are automatically going to win. European contractors remain serious competitors. Vinci brings extensive airport and major infrastructure experience. Webuild and its partner have substantial international consortium footprint. Samsung C&T brings experience in large-scale complex projects. Turkish contractors have also developed significant expertise in major transport and infrastructure construction. The final assessment should therefore come down to more than nationality, cost, construction methodology, schedule credibility, financing terms, risk allocation, local participation, technical capability, and the ability to manage interfaces between the four packages will matter. Let's look at East versus West, but not quite the way it is sometimes presented. Bishoftu competition is increasingly being described as part of a broader East versus West contest. There's some truth in that. In July, senior United States Commerce Department officials said Washington was actively seeking participation by American companies in the airport project. The official linked the effort explicitly to the wider competition for infrastructure and investment influence in Africa. The timing is significant. By August, Chinese companies had emerged as the largest single country presence on the construction shortlist. That does not mean Ethiopia has selected China, nor does it mean that the United States has lost. It does, however, demonstrate the different strengths of the competing system. The Chinese-led model often combines engineering capacity, large construction companies, and access to state-linked financing. Western participation is more fragmented. American companies may offer sophisticated technology, project management capability, and financial strength, but the U.S. construction industry does not operate through the same state-backed infrastructure model as China's large state-owned engineering groups. Europe occupies an intermediate position. Companies such as Vinci and Webuild have extensive international infrastructure presence or experience and access to European and financial institutions, as well as export credit system, but they are still competing commercially rather than as instrument of a single state infrastructure strategy. Ethiopia has every reason to use this competition to its advantage. The country does not have to select between East and West as though the project were a geopolitical referendum. It can choose, or it can select the contractor, financing structure, and technology combination that serves the airport. Indeed, the shortlist itself suggests that this is already happening. Several bidders are joint ventures combining companies from different countries. One of them is We Build IC ICTA's combination. Also includes American linked Lane Construction Corporation. Chinese companies, meanwhile, have formed partnerships with firms from other countries. The real competition is therefore about flags and more about which consortium can assemble the strongest complete delivery packages. And now the financing question, which may be the real story. For project managers, the contractor is only one part of the equation. A mega project fails when its financing, design, procurement, and construction schedules do not line up. Bishoftu has several moving parts that must converge. The design has to be sufficiently advanced for contractors to price the work. The contractor must be able to turn that design into a construction project. Lenders must be satisfied that the contractor or contractual structure protects their investment. The Ethiopian side must be comfortable with the cost and risk allocation, and the various contractors and subcontractors have to be able to work within one overall program. Ethiopia Airlines' earlier project development work demonstrates that financing has been central from the beginning. The airline has worked with African Development Bank as the initial mandated lead arranger, Dal Al-Hadassah as technical advisor, and KPMG as the financial advisor. It has also taken steps to present the project to prospective lenders and investors. That makes the request for more time particularly understandable. The bidder might need additional months, not because it cannot build the airport, but because it needs to demonstrate how it will finance a significant portion of the work and how financial risk will be distributed among the client, contractor, lenders, and other parties. For $12.5 billion project, those details can determine whether a contract is bankable, and the bankability is critical. A contract that looks good on paper but cannot reach financial close is not a successful procurement. Now, could the postponement signal a problem? It would be premature to call it a problem. There is no evidence that Ethiopian Airlines has abandoned its 2030 target, and the airline has said the revised contractor timetable should not affect overall implementation. Nevertheless, from a schedule management standpoint, the extension reduces the available contingency. If major works were expected to accelerate in the second half of 2026, the final contractor appointments move into January 2027. The project team will have to recover those months elsewhere or accept smaller schedule buffer. That does not automatically threaten the 2030 completion timetable or date. Large projects routinely recover time through parallel activities, additional work fronts, and carefully sequenced procurement, but the margin for error becomes smaller. The risk is especially significant because this is not a conventional single building project. 4 major work packages have to be coordinated, while roads and other offsite links must connect the airport to the wider transport system. Interface management becomes critical. If one contractor finishes a section late, another contractor may be unable to start. If equipment specification change, procurement can be affected. If financing of one package takes longer to close, the overall construction sequence can be disrupted. This is why Ethiopian Airlines' decision to allow bidders more time may ultimately prove sensible. 5 months at procurement stage can be cheaper than 5 years of construction disputes. Then, what should Ethiopia be looking for? The strongest bid should not necessarily be the cheapest bid. For an international airport of this magnitude, Ethiopia should look for a whole life value of the proposal. That includes the initial construction price, financing cost, program certainty, quality assurance, maintenance requirements, technology transfer, local employment, Ethiopia's contractor participation, and the contractor's record of delivering projects of comparable complexity. Financing terms deserve particular scrutiny. A contractor offering cheaper construction but more expensive financing may not be cheaper overall. Conversely, a higher construction price can sometimes be justified if the financing is substantially better or if the contractor provides stronger guarantees around schedule and performance. Risk allocation is equally important. The question is not whether risks exist, they will. The question is who is best placed to manage each risk and who ultimately pays when that risk materializes. That is where experienced project governance becomes more valuable than political symbolism. Ethiopia should also resist the temptation to turn procurement into a simple geopolitical context. Competition between China, Europe, the Gulf, Turkey, India, and United States can work in Ethiopia's favor if it creates better prices, better financing, and better contractual terms. The country has bargaining power precisely because the project is attractive to so many international players. And then we see a decision bigger than the airport. Bishoftu International Airport is ultimately about much more than replacing or supplementing Bole. It is an attempt to build the infrastructure around which Ethiopian Airlines can continue its expansion as one of Africa's most important aviation groups. The airline records gives the project a credible commercial rationale. The challenge is making sure that the airport extraordinary scale does not become an extraordinary source of financial and construction risk. Postponement from August 2026 to January 2027 should therefore be watched carefully but not sensationalized. The stated reason: additional time for technical proposals, financial negotiations, and subcontractor arrangements is consistent with realities of an EPCF mega project. The more revealing issue is what happens during those additional months. If Ethiopian Airlines uses the period to improve bid quality, close financing gaps, sharpen risk allocation, and force stronger competition among the shortlisted groups, the delay could ultimately strengthen the project. If, on the other hand, January arrives without clear financing commitments and without sufficient mature technical and commercial proposals, the 5-month extension will have been only the first sign of a deeper schedule problem. The Chinese dominance of the shortlist makes the outcome geopolitically interesting, but the procurement should ultimately be judged by a more practical standards. Can the winning consortium financing build, integrate, and deliver the airport at the promised cost and time? That is the test. Whether the final contractor comes from wherever, China, Europe, Turkey, South Korea, India, or the Gulf, or a multinational joint venture, that matters. But for a 12.5 billion airport, the bigger issue is whether Ethiopia gets a contract structure capable of turning an extraordinary vision into a functioning airport. The January 2027 decision will provide the first serious indication of whether Bishoftu is merely world's most ambitious airport proposal or the beginning of a new chapter in Africa aviation infrastructure. If you have got here, thank you. Please consider subscribing to this channel. You can watch other videos that you have made on this airport, other projects in Ethiopia and the wider East African region and Africa as a whole. So thank you, and let's meet in the next one.